Hello, guys and gals, and this is, I believe, just let me check really quick here. I'll make sure that I have it right here. This is part 5 of our reading of The Princess Bride. Let me just check. Yep. 2, 3, 4. This is number 5. Okay, so, in the last episode, we learned about first of all, though, we should probably go over the copyright information. This is really important. Let me find it. It says here that is copyright 1973 by William Goldman. All rights reserved. Published in the United States by Ballantine Books, a division of Random House Incorporated, New York, and simultaneously in Canada by Ballantine Books of Canada, Limited, Toronto, Canada. And it gives the edition here. And it says the cover art is by Norman Green. Also, this says it is a hot fairy tale. So, anyways, we are going to pick up where we left off. I believe that the princess or whatever was upset because the stable boy was getting so much attention and she kind of has a crush on him, I think. Oh yeah, her name is Buttercup. Okay. She's so old, Buttercup muttered, starting to storm a bit now. The Countess would never see 30 again, and that was fact, and her dress looked ridiculous out in the cowshed. And that was fact, too. Buttercup fell into the bed and clutched her pillow across her breasts. The dress was ridiculous before it even got to the cowshed. The Countess looked rotten the minute she left the carriage, with her too big painted mouth and her little piggy painted eyes and her powdered skin and flailing and thrashing. Buttercup wept and tossed and paced and wept some more. And there had been 3 great cases of jealousy since David of Galilee was first afflicted with the emotion, when he could no longer stand the fact that his neighbor Saul's cactus outshone his own. Originally, jealousy pertained solely to plants, other people's cactuses or ginkgos, or later, when they were grass, which is why even to this day they say that someone is green with jealousy. Buttercup's case rated a close 4th on the all-time list. It was a very long and very green night. She was outside his hovel before dawn. Inside, she could hear him already awake. She knocked. He appeared, stood in the doorway behind him. She could see a tiny candle, open books. He waited. She looked at him. Then she looked away. He was too beautiful. I love you, Buttercup said. I know this must come as something of a surprise, since all I've ever done is scorn you and degrade you and taunt you, but I have loved you for several hours now, and every second more. And every second more. I thought an hour ago that I loved you more than any woman had ever loved a man, but a half hour after that I knew that what I felt before was nothing compared to what I felt then. But 10 minutes after that, I understood that my previous love was a puddle compared to the high seas before a storm. Your eyes are like that. Did you know? Well, they are. How many minutes ago was I? 20? Had I brought my feelings up to then? It doesn't matter. Buttercup still could not look at him. The sun was rising behind her now. She could feel the heat on her back, and it gave her courage. I love you so much more now than 20 minutes ago that there cannot be comparison. I love you so much more now than when you opened your hovel door. There cannot be comparison. There is no room in my body for anything but you. My arms love you, my ears adore you, my knees shake with blind affection, my mind begs you to ask it something so it can obey. Do you want me to follow you for the rest of your days? I will do that. Do you want me to crawl? I will crawl. I will be quiet for you or sing for you. Or if you are hungry, let me be your food. Oh, let me bring your food. Sorry, almost turned this into a vor thing. Let me bring your food. Or if you have thirst and nothing will quench it but Arabian wine, I will go to Araby. It's actually spelled Araby. Okay. Um, every Even though it is across the world, and bring a bottle back for your lunch. Anything there is that I can do for you, I will do for you. Anything there is that I cannot do, I will learn to do. I know I cannot compete with the Countess in skill or wisdom or appeal, and I saw the way she looked at you, and I saw the way you looked at her. But remember, please, that she is old and has other interests, while I am 17, and for me, there is only you. Dearest Wesley, I've never called you that before, have I? Wesley, 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 darling Wesley, adored Wesley, sweet, perfect Wesley, whisper that I have a chance to win your love, and that she dared, oh, and with that she dared the bravest thing she'd ever done. She looked right into his eyes. He closed the door in her face, without a word, without a word. Buttercup ran. She whirled and burst away, and the tears came bitterly. She could not see. She stumbled. She slammed into a tree trunk, fell, rose, ran on. Her shoulder throbbed from where the tree trunk hit her, and the pain was strong, but not enough to ease her shattered heart. Back to her room, she fled back to her pillow. Safe behind the locked door, she drenched the world with tears. Not even one word. He hadn't had the decency for that. Sorry, he couldn't have said. Would have ruined would it have ruined him to say sorry? Too late. He could have said. Why couldn't he at least have said something? Buttercup thought very hard about that for a moment, and suddenly she had the answer. He didn't talk because the minute he opened his mouth, that was it. Surely he was handsome but dumb. The minute he had exercised his tongue, it would have all been over. Duh. That's what he would have said. That was the kind of thing Wesley came at. That's the blah 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 blah. That's what he would have said. That was the kind of thing Wesley came out with when he was feeling rather sharp. Duh. Tanks, Buttercup. Buttercup dried her tears and began to smile. She took a deep breath, heaved a sigh. It was all part of growing up. You got these little quick passions. You blinked and they were gone. You forgave faults. I found perfections. Fell madly. Then the next day the sun came up and it was over. Chalk it up to experience, old girl, and get on with the morning. Buttercup stood, made her bed, changed her clothes, combed her hair, smiled, and burst out again in a fit of weeping because there was a limit to just how much you could lie to yourself. Wesley wasn't stupid. Oh, she could pretend he was. She could laugh about his difficulties with the language. She could chide herself for her silly infatuation with a dollard. The fact was simply this. He had a head on his shoulders with a brain inside every bit as good as his teeth. There was a reason he hadn't spoken, and it had nothing to do with gray cells working, and he hadn't spoken because really there was nothing for him to say. He didn't love her back, and that was that. The tears that kept Buttercup company the remainder of the day were not at all like those that had blinded her into the tree trunk. Those were noisy and hot. These pulsed. These were silent and steady, and all they did was remind her that she wasn't good enough. She was 17, and every male she'd ever known had crumbled at her feet, and it meant nothing. The one time it mattered, she wasn't good enough. All she knew really was riding, and how was that to interest a man when the man had been looked at by the Countess? It was dusk when she heard footsteps outside her door. Then a knock. Buttercup dried her eyes Another knock. Whoever is that? Buttercup yawned finally. Wesley. Buttercup lounged across the bed. Wesley, she said. Do I know any Oh, farm boy. It's you. How droll. She went to her door, unlocked it, and said in her fanciest tone, I'm ever so glad you stopped by. I've been feeling just ever so slummy about the little joke I played on you this morning. Of course you knew I wasn't for a moment serious, or at least I thought you knew. But then just when you started closing the door, I thought for one drearest instant that perhaps I'd done my little jest a bit too convincingly. And poor dear thing, you poor dear thing, you might have thought I meant what I said, when of course we both know the total impossibility of that ever happening. I've come to say goodbye. Buttercup's heart bucked, but she still held to fancy. You're going to sleep, you mean? And you've come to say good night? That's thoughtful of you, farm boy. Showing me that you forgive me for my little morning's tease. I certainly appreciate your thoughtfulness, and he cut her off. I'm leaving. Leaving? The floor began to ripple. She held onto the doorframe. Now? Yes. Because of what I said this morning? Yes. I frightened you away, didn't I? I could kill my tongue. I could kill my tongue. She shook her head and shook her head. Oh, she shook her head and shook her head. Okay. Well, it's done. You've made your decision. Just remember this. I won't take you back when she's done with you. I don't care if you beg. He just looked at her. Buttercup hurried on. Just because you're beautiful and perfect, it's made you conceited. You think people can't get tired of you. Well, you're wrong. They can, and she will. Besides, you're too poor. I'm going to America to seek my fortune. This was just after America, but long after fortunes. A ship sails soon for London. There is great opportunity in America. I'm going to take advantage of it. I've been training myself. In my hovel, I've taught myself not to need sleep, a few hours only. I'll take a 10-hour a day job, and then I'll take another 10-hour a day job, and I'll save every penny from both except what I need to eat or to keep strong. And when I have enough, I'll buy a farm and build a house and make a bed big enough for two. You're just crazy if you think she's going to be happy in some rundown farmhouse in America. Not with what she spends on clothes. Stop talking about the Countess as a special favor before you drive me mad. Buttercup looked at him. Don't you understand anything that's going on? Buttercup shook her head. Wesley shook his too. You never have been the brightest, I guess. Do you love me, Wesley? Is that it? He couldn't believe it. Do I love you? My goodness, if your love were a grain of sand, mine would be a universe of beaches. If your love were... I don't understand that first one yet, Buttercup interrupted. She was starting to get very excited now. Let me get this straight. Are you saying my love is the size of a grain of sand and yours is this other thing? Images just confuse me so. Is this universal business of yours bigger than my sand? Help me, Wesley. I have the feeling we're on the verge of something just terribly important. Okay. I stayed these years in my hovel because of you. I have taught myself languages because of you. I have made my body strong because of I thought you might be pleased by a strong body. I have lived my life with only the prayer that some sudden dawn you might glance in my direction. I have not known a moment in years when the sight of you did not send my heart careening against my rib cage. I have not known a night when your visage did not accompany me to sleep. There has not been a morning which you did not flutter behind my waking eyelids. Is any of this getting through to you, Buttercup? Or do you want me to go on for a while? Never stop. There has not been... If you're teasing me, Wesley, I'm just going to kill you. How could you ever... dream I might be teasing. Well, you haven't once said that you loved me. That's all you need? Easy, I love you, okay? Want it louder? I love you. Spell it out, should I? ILOVEYOU. Want it backwards? You love I. You are teasing now, aren't you? A little, maybe. I've been saying it so long to you. You just wouldn't listen. Every time you say farm boy, do it, you thought I was answering as you wish, but that's only because you were hearing wrong. I love you was what I was what it was, but you never heard, and you never heard. I hear you now, and I promise you this. I will never love anyone else, only Wesley until I die. He nodded, took a step away. I'll send for you soon, believe me. Would my Wesley ever lie? He took another step. I'm late. I must go. I hate it, but I must. The ship sails soon, and London is far, I understand. He reached out with his right hand. Buttercup found it very hard to breathe. Goodbye. She managed to raise her right hand to his. They shook. Goodbye, he said again. She made a little nod. He took a third step, not turning. She watched him. He turned. And the words ripped out of her. Without one kiss, they fell into each other's arms. There had been 5 great kisses since 1642 BC, when Saul and Delilah Corn's inadvertent discovery swept across Western civilization. Before then, couples hooked thumbs. And the precise rating of kisses is a terribly difficult thing, often leading to great controversy, because although everyone agrees with the formula of affection times purity times intensity times duration, no one has ever been completely satisfied with how much weight each element should receive. But on any system, there are 5 that everyone agrees deserves full marks. Well, this one left them all behind. The first morning after Wesley's departure, Buttercup thought she was entitled to do nothing more than sit around moping and feeling sorry for herself. After all, the love of her life had fled. Life had no meaning. How could you face the future, etc., etc.? But after about 2 seconds of that, she realized that Wesley was out in the world now, getting nearer and nearer to London. And what if a beautiful city girl caught his fancy while she was just back here moldering? Or worse, what if he got to America and worked his jobs and built his farm and made their bed and sent for her, and when she got there, he would look at her and say, "I'm sending you back. The moping has destroyed your eyes, and the self-pity has taken your skin. You're a slobby-looking creature. I'm marrying an Indian girl who lives in a teepee nearby and is always in the peak of condition." Buttercup ran to her room mirror. "Oh, Wesley," she said, "I must never disappoint you." And she hurried downstairs to where her parents were squabbling. 16 to 13, and not past breakfast yet. "I need your advice," she interrupted. "What can I do to improve my personal appearance?" "Start by bathing," her father said. "And do something with your hair while you're at it," her mother said. "Unearth the territory behind your ears. Neglect not your knees." "That will do nicely for starters," Buttercup said. She shook her head. "Gracious, but it isn't easy being tidy." Undaunted, she set to work. Every morning she awoke, if possible, by dawn and got the farm chores finished immediately. There was much to be done now, with Wesley gone, and more than that, ever since the Count had visited, everyone in the area had increased his milk orders, so there was no time for self-improvement until well into the afternoon. But then she really set to work. First, a good cold bath. Then, while the hair was drying, she would slave, and after fixing her figure faults, One of her elbows was just too bony, the opposite wrist not bony enough, and exercise what remained of her baby fat, little left now, she was nearly 18, and brush her hair. Her hair was the color of autumn and had never, it's hard to read this, never been cut, so 1,000 strokes took time. But she didn't mind because Wesley had never seen it clean like this, and wouldn't he be surprised when she stepped off the boat in America? Her skin was the color of wintry cream, and she scrubbed her every inch well past glistening, and that wasn't much fun really. But wouldn't Wesley be pleased with how clean she was as she stepped off the boat in America? And very quickly now, her potential began to be realized. From 20th, she jumped within 2 weeks to 15th. An unheard of change in such a time, but 3 weeks after that, she was already ninth and moving and moving. The competition was tremendous now, but the day after she was ninth, a 3-page letter arrived from Wesley in London, and just reading it over put her up to eighth. That was really what was doing it for her more than anything. Her love for Wesley would not stop growing, and people were dazzled when she delivered milk in the morning. Some people were only able to gape at her, but many talked, and those that did found her warmer and gentler than she had ever been before. Even the village girls would nod and smile now, and some of them would ask after Wesley, which was a mistake unless that you happened to have a lot of spare time, because when someone asked Buttercup how Wesley was, well, she told them. He was supreme as usual. He was spectacular. He was singularly fabulous. Or she could go on for hours. Sometimes it got a little tough for the listeners to maintain strict attention, but they did their best since Buttercup loved him so completely, which was why Wesley's death hit her the way it did. What? Okay, that was out of nowhere. He had written to her just before he sailed for America. The Queen's Pride was his ship, and he loved her. And he loved her. That was the way his sentence always went. It is raining today, and I love you. My cold is better, and I love you. Say hello to horse, and I love you. Like that. Then there were no letters, but that was natural. He was at sea. Then she heard. She came home from delivering the milk, and her parents were wooden. Off the Carolina coast, her mother whispered, without warning, at night. What? For Buttercup? Pirates, said her father. Buttercup thought she'd better sit down. Quiet in the room. He's been taken prisoner then? Buttercup managed. Her mother made a no. It was Roberts, her father said. The dread pirate Roberts. Oh, Buttercup said. The one who never leaves survivors. Yes, her father said. Quiet in the room. Suddenly Buttercup was talking very fast. Was he stabbed? Did he drown? Did they cut his throat? Asleep? Did they wake him? Do you suppose? Perhaps they whipped him dead. She stood up. Then I'm getting silly. Forgive me. She shook her head, as if the way they got him mattered. Excuse me, please. With that, she hurried to her room. She stayed there many days. At first, her parents tried to lure her, but she would not have it. They took to leaving food outside the room, and she took bites and shreds through enough to stay alive. There was never noise inside, no wailing, no bitter sounds. And when she at last came out, her eyes were dry. Her parents stared up from their silent breakfast at her. They both started to rise, but she put a hand out, stopping them. I can care for myself, please, she said. She set about getting some food. They watched her closely. In point of fact, she had never looked as well. She had entered her room as just an impossibly lovely girl. The woman who emerged was a trifle thinner, a great deal wiser, and ocean sadder. This one understands the nature of pain, and beneath the glory of her features, there was character and a sure knowledge of suffering. She was 18. She was the most beautiful woman in 100 years. She didn't seem to care. "You're all right?" her mother asked. Buttercup sipped her cocoa. "Fine," she said. "You're sure?" her father wondered. "Yes," Buttercup replied. There was a very long pause. "But I must never love again." She never did. Chapter 2, The Groom. Okay, we might have time for... This was my first major excision. Chapter 1, The Bride, is almost in its entirety about the bride. Chapter 2, The Groom, only picks up Prince Humperdinck in the last few pages. This chapter is where my son Jason stopped reading, and there is simply no way of blaming him for what Morgenstern has done is open this chapter with 66 pages of Florinese history. Most accurately, it is the history of the Florinese crown. Dreary, not to be believed. Why would a master of narrative stop his narrative dead before it had much chance to begin generating? No known answer. All I can guess is that for Morgenstern, the real narrative was not Buttercup and the remarkable things that she endured, but rather the history of the monarch and other such stuff. When this version comes out, I expect every Florinese scholar alive to slaughter me. Columbia University has not only the leading Florinese experts in America, but also direct ties to the New York Times Book Review. I can't help that, and I only hope that they understand that my intentions here are in no way meant to be destructive of Morgenstern's version. And we're going to stop it here, and we will pick up where we left off. We've been reading from William Goldman's The Princess Bride. If you like this content, then make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, if you want to support me in any way, all the information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.